You're listening to the Feral House Podcast, a semi-regular discussion of books with the authors who wrote them.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Feral House Podcast. And sitting next to me, kind of, sorta, virtually, is Al Ridenour. You may recognize Al's name from his incredible book on the Krampus, which we published a few years ago. But we're here today to talk about his latest book for us, A Season of Madness. It is beautiful, full color images, and chock-a-block with Al's incredible detailed research. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, because we love the Krampus book so much. So we went back to Al and we said, you have this incredible podcast, Bone Sickle, which is about folklore and folkloric history. What else could you write about? And so he wrote about Carnival, not what Americans may think of a New Orleans carnival, but real European Old World Carnival. Al, what does Old World Carnival actually mean to listeners?
Well, it's not. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. And I was very happy to exploit the interest in the Krampus. I want to go back to that a little bit later because there is definitely the through line on all that. Carnival it's not that different from what we have in New Orleans. Is a sort of abbreviated version of Carnival. It's what people seem to confuse. And when I told people I was working on a Carnival book, what I would hear over and over was, "Oh yeah, I love sideshows. Do you have any?" And I do too. And so it was quite reasonable they thought I was working on that. But yeah, the sort of tilt-a-whirl and sideshow carnival midway thing is different from the carnival in New Orleans, which is very much it's not the kind of carnival I'm writing about because the topic is very broad. So I had to narrow it down. First of all, because of the Krampus book, I wanted to kind of focus on things that were interwoven with the Krampus history. So I focused on European customs, and particularly ones that were kind of more like folk customs, like the Krampus tradition began as, at least. So geographically focused, and then also kind of ruled out some of the bigger carnivals in some of the big cities that are famous, very famous, but feel more like an American parade. The thing about New Orleans is it is wild and chaotic, which is sort of another trait that would put it in my book. But it's also become anything that has any kind of shelf life tends to be taken over a bit by the municipal authorities and kind of given shape by that. So I tried to look particularly at things that began with the people and began in the country and began in the homes out in the country, as the Krampus tradition did. There's also we have a residue of carnival. The only other thing we really have in the U.S. is in Philadelphia, the Mummers Parade is related. It's related to the carnival customs of Europe, and also beyond New Orleans, the Cajun Carnival is very much like what I write about. It's kind of shockingly like that. And it's also kind of wild, and it involves the house-to-house visits like the Krampus tradition does.
No, okay, I have some questions now. So
What is
first
Carnival?
of all, yeah, let's talk about what is Carnival. I mean, and so we understand it. There's, again, Americans, if you grew up at all with any semblance of Catholic tradition, you kind of associate that time period with Catholicism a little bit. But also, we know the folkloric traditions, which are pre-Catholic. So tell me, what is Carnival? Why are people out there knocking on doors?
Well, it is Carnival is intimately tied with Catholicism and with Lent. Protestants have Lent too, but it's not as big a deal. And ended up not including very much about and hardly anything about the UK because of the whole Henry VIII thing. So it's very tied in with Catholic Lent, which is taken more seriously. And certainly, you go back in history, is much more serious. The renunciations, what you had to do, no butter, no eggs, no meat, all of that. So this carnival was the last gasp before Lent began. And it's still, it would be Fat Tuesday in New Orleans. Mardi Gras is the fat we're talking about here is the fat that you would be giving up. We're not going to be eating butter, but you're also not going to be eating pork fat. So Carnival, and in fact, even in Russia, it's called the Butter Festival. Maslenitsa is so it's this idea of cutting out of what you would be renouncing through Lent is critical to it. It's so you kind of can't understand Carnival, at least historically, without understanding the relationship with Lent and dietary restrictions. So Carnival's the opposite of Lent. It's about indulgence, all sorts of wildness. In Germany, the icon of the fool was made. My book's called A Season of Madness because there was a time people went mad before they would kind of get in order and begin their good penitential Lenten duties. So yeah, this is far beyond food. It's also and drink too. So everything that is the opposite of Lent would sort of build up until that last day, and then would be celebrated, and people would. The next day they have a terrible hangover and they'd be like, this Lent thing isn't such a bad idea.
So it's a Catholic, European Catholic version of dry January, but
Yes.
also
Yes.
so
Nothing is new. Nothing we come up
nothing
with
is new. No. So I'm always fascinated by both folkloric, because it's a really common thing to think if something is folkloric, therefore it's pagan. But
Yes.
you're seeing very seriously that Carnival is intertwined with Catholicism. And so how does folklore and folkloric traditions kind of interact and play in this sense of Carnival that we see still to this day celebrated in Europe?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because the whole idea of paganism is often misunderstood. I was talking to somebody who does a podcast about the medieval mindset, basically, and the idea of folk Catholicism is something people miss, and it's very much at the core of my Krampus book. The Krampus tradition isn't a pagan tradition; it's within the Catholic world, but it's also of the people. It's not a theologically rigid. And so Carnival was that. Certainly, the church wasn't saying you need to have Carnival, but it was a response in the Catholic world, which we have kind of forgotten. What was your question? Your general question.
Yeah, so we were talking about like the intersection of like, so a lot of people mistake both Krampus and some of when they see some of the monster type get-ups, that it's just assumed to be pagan.
Well,
but you're saying it's not, but there's folk Catholicism, traditional. So how does this all work together?
The imagery is as with the Krampus, you pulled on the Krampus represents in the Christian world view, it represents Satan, the devil, and his demons. But they pulled on all of their folk traditions of what devils are, scary winter spirits, and they gave him that form. Or they gave him sort of goatish form, because all that starts in a world where there are, where you're making cheese in the mountains and herding goats. But so some of the monsters in the book that I present are their form is dictated by what's in the world of the sort of agrarian world of the people, and they don't represent anything from the Catholic theology or anything, but they're the again, like as with the Krampus, the sort of the boogeyman, and it's just every locality has different kind of demons or spirits that represent power or fertility. These aren't during the Carnival. It's not really the spirits that visit are very ambiguous. They're not punishing, because the Krampus is associated with kind of moral good and bad and punishment. These spirits are more associated with fertility. So people that care about the farmers that cared about fertility aren't pagans. They lived in the Catholic world, but they drew from the folk traditions of their world. So the correnti or the kukari or all of these creatures have the shape that you would see in your grandma's folk tales.
Okay, so thanks. That explains it. How they Catholic monsters, so to speak.
Catholic monsters, yeah.
So I think it's really fascinating and just a joy to work with you on the book. Is the images, the pictures of people celebrating Carnival, just incredible. And I just, please, I mean, obviously, buy the book. And if you can't buy it, go to the library. Libraries are fantastic. Request it from the library. You really do want to see this book in color in your hands. But I know, personally, I know that you recently were in Europe, and you got to experience some of these celebrations firsthand. What was it like? Tell me a little bit. Do my travelogue for me. What was it like to see
Well,
these up
I
front?
before that, I want to say that the book has been shaped by where I knew there were great images. I'm also a visual artist of sorts, and so I kind of focus on things that were visual. I'm attracted to that, and I also like, well, where can we get? So that also helped me shape what do we focus on. So yeah, so where I knew there were strong visuals, that would be a chapter of the book, and I can always dive deep and research history and pull textual information. But sometimes if something doesn't look good, I don't think people are going to want to buy my book, and I don't care about it. So anyway, that that's for the visual emphasis. Yeah, I did go to as the book was coming out. I went to Venice for Carnival. And I've been to Venice before, but now, of course, I'm definitely focused on Carnival. It was the Carnival season. I went to Venice, which is very, very different from the sort of carnival I describe. In fact, I only talk about Venice as a in historical context because there is there's a monstrous. It's not that people aren't dressing up as monsters, but the behavior could be kind of monstrous. And this is sort of all of the medieval world for us would seem monstrous, I suppose. But yeah, so Venice I talked about, but then our image of Venice is the very aristocratic 18th century,
Mhm.
so that I'm not, really has very little to do with my book. I don't know if I even put it, I guess I put there are some pictures of that. But the thing I was excited about going to was, and this had been on my bucket list for a while, and certainly while I was working in the book, I was like, I have to go to this. It's in South Tyrol, which is the German-speaking region of northern Italy. It's officially Italian, but the people there tell you we speak German. It's very politicized whether you're actually going to speak the language that the unification wanted for you to speak. Anyway, so felt German to me, so it felt familiar in that sense. But it's parade floats, which sounds like the kind of thing I kind of excised from my book. It's not interesting, but these parade floats are they're wagons. They're just like rustic wagons, and it's so participatory. Almost every wagon has somebody cooking on it. There's like grease fires on the wagons. There's so much smoke. The whole thing was smoky. So people are cooking and giving out food. Wine's being poured off the wagons. And the costumes are all kind of 19th century, but there's a lot of it's rough and very rough and tumble too. There are people costumed as witches going through the crowd, smearing people with ash. I have my current social media picture has a ash smear from one of the witches there, and they're throwing all sorts of stuff off these floats. The feathers. There's a washerwoman float. So the floats are all represent different kind of types, village types. So there are washerwomen, there are gypsies, because that was a sort of type, the Roma people, but in their mind, it's a different thing. Even more modern, like, well, 19th century, like bicycle repair, is their bicycle repair shop. And those people are throwing rubber tires and metal bicycle parts off. The washerwomen are throwing wet laundry and slapping people with wet laundry. There are fishermen that have fishing poles, and they're smacking people in the face with with fish that are hooked onto the poles. There's a mill that goes through that's like uh, they're separating wheat from the wheat from the chaff. So the
Okay.
chaff is spraying on people. So I had chaff stuck on my face for a lot of the day. So it's this big immersive cloud of chaos, and everybody, this is typical throughout almost like at least over half of the carnival events. People's faces are blacked with ash, which is kind of sort of a universal signature sign of I am from another world. I'm not from your normal human civilization. So this is
Oh,
our time of being crazy and bad and outside. And this is like that was in northern Italy, but you see it in Bulgaria, you see it in Sardinia, up in the north, in Europe and Germany. So it's very common. So people blacking people's faces was a part of it. Throwing people in wash tubs was a part of it. Filling people. There's a cobbler's. Sorry, I'm just going on. I get excited.
No,
There was
this
a
is
there was
fascinating.
a cobbler's wagon where they're like drag people out of the crowd, took their shoes off, and decided they needed to be resized, so they'd fill them with shaving cream and put them back on, and then stuff straw in the shoe, and then yeah. So it's very much like you know. In the 90s, I'd been to things like crash worship shows or Gigi Allen and stuff, and this is right up there. It's very much a deep dive into chaos.
Okay, so now I have more questions. So very two specific ones, which I'm intrigued. This is new to me, this like, notion of the idea of obscuring your face and blacking it out. Do masks then serve the same purpose by
Yeah,
masking? Is
ma
it a way to,
mask
okay.
masks are an elegant way to do that. With the Krampus too, a lot of the early stuff it would involve blacking your face. It would just be ashes out of your fireplace. Everybody had that, so there's no carving, there's nothing involved. It's just a way. It's actually hard to recognize a face when it's black and you can't see the highlights and the
Mhm.
receded areas.
So then the secondary question to that is, so given all the shenanigans, for lack of a better word, are people obscuring their faces from their friends and neighbors and family, or are they obscuring their faces from God, judging them?
There's debate about that. Like with the Krampus traditions, for instance, they talked about they represent the dead. So there's the idea that blacking represents the spirit from the other world in that sense. I don't. I think there's something there. I don't go into that because I don't. That's sort of theoretical, so I don't really address that kind of thing too much in my book. But yeah, it seems almost as if I think the blacking you know, in Germany particularly, they have a whole theology built around Carnival, and it was sort of the devil's time out. So
Ah,
I think there's a little sense that this is the in the topsy-turvy world, this is when the devil is ascended, and then when Lent things balance themselves again. So it could be they could be in with the Krampus tradition. I was told they represent the dead, or I read that several people think many writers think that. But also yes, they could represent devils, and they could just there's a sort of basic psychological thing where if you put a mask on, you feel more free to
mm.
wreak havoc and be mischievous. So I think it could be that. It is hard to recognize a face when the features are black like that. So
Yeah, it is. So that and again, fascinating, and people definitely need to read the book. This is the fun part because now I can ask him these theoretical questions, and it's a podcast, so he won't be held accountable for
that's
any
right. No, there
answers
are no
really.
footnotes to this.
Right, no footnotes here. So in thinking about this, and we talked about that, Carnival as like um a vaccine against the aesthetic, the really just the of Lent, of your giving up. And it is a time, if you're not familiar with the Catholic tradition, is the Lenten season is a 40-day season where you are supposed to be thinking about the suffering of God, the suffering of Jesus, as well as then take that on board, and you do a form of kind of an atonement, a form of fasting by, as Al was mentioning, giving up specific foods, and oftentimes giving up indulgences, something that could be considered like vice light. If you went to a Catholic school as a kid, it was very common you give up candy during Lent. Um, and so by Carnival being so excessive, and we usually understand it's like excessive drinking, excessive eating, and some of the nudity that goes along with what we in the New Orleans style Carnival. Um, but in the European sense, and you're talking about a little bit of violence in there that I don't know if we see in the American side. So where did the violence part come
It's
in?
it's really hard because our world we were so separate from some of the violence they talk about is involves bullfights were common in Italy and Spain for Carnival, and there were some other in Venice in Venice there was Venice actually has a very long historically long, but also the season is very long. It starts in February, so lots of events are kind of collected under Carnival, and one of them commemorates a victory over another local prince. And celebrating that, the Doge would Venice would uh, apparently he asked for 12 hostages basically, and in there told them they were going to be uh, put to death, but in their place they would sacrifice 12 pigs. So that went on, and when I went to Venice, that was the best thing I saw. There's a procession with people, 12 people with wonderful paper mache pigs heads and little ruffed collars. But the 12 pig sacrifice, they would be slaughtered in the piazza, and and in Rome they had a much earlier they had a sort of festival that involves more slaughtered pigs in carts that were rolled down a hill. The cart would crash, and then people would run in to eat. I guess the pigs usually were dead, but they'd run in to get their claim of pork, and then of course you'd have to eat it pretty fast. So there's a lot of kind of meat-oriented things too, and there's debate about. There's even the German festival they talk about. They were sponsored by the Butchers Guild, so the butchers were like trying to kind of have a last minute marketing probably and make some money for when they weren't going to be selling meat during Lent. But yeah, so there's all that. There's all that sort of thing with. But what I was going to say was it's hard to know what's even considered violent because now all of medieval life seems violent to us. We're so unaccustomed to any of that sort of thing. There was definitely, Rome had some very cruel events. They had a race of the Jews. They also had a race of deformed people or race of children, elderly. So there was a sort of malice too that was, I guess, comical back then. As we also don't understand their sense of humor, it's not really humorous to us now. But the violence and the cruelty. I mean, that's also that's also not supposed to be part of Lent. So I don't know. I can't
Right.
explain it in broad terms, but it was a sort of unleashing of a lot of kind of uh, things from the
And
id.
so monsters from the id. So
Yeah.
as it comes through then in modern interpretations, and I understand like tradition. So these things, and people are going to whack you in the face with a fish. At this festival, this parade. But do people embrace like that modern interpretation of some of the violent aspects of modern carnival as just fun, or is it a release?
Oh, I mean, if you're talking about the thing I experienced in South Tyrol, the Egetmann procession, if anybody wants to look that up, there's a whole section in my book about it. You can buy the book and then you'll know what I'm talking about. Um, it's definitely it's a culturally learned thing. I think people definitely there are parts of Los Angeles where you couldn't bring this to our, it's of the community, so it'd be hard to
Mm,
bring things outside of that context. I don't think any of that, well, when I visited, I don't think any of that reads as violent there. I think it reads as exhausting. I was exhausted at the end of the day. I was dirty and tired and drunk. But
mm.
I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
You are actually, because that's a really important point that these are time and place. And that oftentimes, and I think this is here's, I'm going to think the big thought. And this is some of the cultural friction that we have in the United States is it's what is authentic, what is not. The United States is not an authentic country. We're kind of, we're scrappy and we're, a Frankenstein monster of a country built from a bunch of different traditions, and not everybody's going to agree with all of those traditions, and so you have that conflict. And it sounds to me very much that of a time and place. And so while we can appreciate carnival, but it would be fun. I mean, there are some locations that still have some vestigial carnival. You mentioned earlier, what does Philadelphia do with the mummers that's so different than anybody else is doing?
There are very elaborate costumes, so elaborate that they actually required it's like kind of imagine like a walker that an old person would have, but they're supported by wheeled structures underneath. So they're very, I mean, I guess it's like the South American Carnival obviously has huge costumes too. The funny thing about the Philadelphia Mummers was it started as and this is the story of a lot of the events I discuss in the book. It started as a kind of spontaneous grassroots thing, and then the city just like, okay, this is getting out of hand. There were groups that called shooters, which shot guns into the air, which were still, in some parts of the country, people, when they are exuberant on holidays, they still shoot guns in the air. But they decided that it got a little out of control. So what cities always do, and this happened, and it's the same thing. It's happened in Bulgaria. It happened in Slovenia. Different things I'm talking about. They in my book, they give a prize for the best costume. And so then it focuses people. You have to parade them in a central street. There's money involved, so it kind of gets it out of the neighborhoods where it's not under the watchful eye of the authorities. And what happened, and what's funny, especially in Bulgaria, is their costumes got bigger. They are not traditional. They got bigger than they ever were. So they sort of caused the tradition to kind of evolve in a weird way. I guess it's like putting some unnatural fertilizer on a plant or something. But yeah, there's a kind of a domestication thing that they go through with cities.
And then the mummers in Philadelphia, now is it a one
It's
day? Is it
it's
a
a parade.
period
It's
of time?
actually
Okay.
it's a parade, and it's on New Year's Day. I believe
Oh,
it was there's a New Year's was originally kind of part of Carnival. This is a whole one of the talks I started giving on the book was how Carnival is Christmas, Christmas is Carnival, and this is how I got interested in the topic, because these things are interlocked in a way. I think it might have been on Epiphany, January 6th, which is the official start in most of Europe for Carnival.
mhm.
But so I think it's on New Year's Day, and it's a procession. It's a procession, a parade through the city, and it's still an occasion. The spectators are get wild and drunk, and the costumes are very elaborate, and they look sort of something like a low rent version maybe of what you would see in South America, Latin America.
Mhm.
But I haven't been there. I'd like to go there. I went to the Mummers Hall in Philadelphia, which is interesting. There used to be a door-to-door custom like the Krampus was, and like some of the other ones I discussed in Madness. And they had a rhyme they would say when the mummers arrived at the door. And it was exactly the same, but in English, of what the German visitors to homes would say in the Christmas season. I mean, it's sort of a rough translation, but I mean, and Philly had a lot of Germans in it, obviously.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's definitely interesting to see these things kind of interwoven at their base.
Right. And then you mentioned the other kind of American kind of carnival. It would be the Cajun carnival, which I was not familiar with at all. How is that different from like kind of, I mean, obviously New Orleans is kind of more touristy and very
Yeah,
commercial.
the
And
Cajun
what's the difference about the Cajun, and where, if somebody wanted to go and
Cajun
be a
car.
part of
I
that,
don't know if I don't.
where do they
I'm
go?
not. I'm not taking responsibility for recommending it. Cajun Carnival is in the country. It's the different troops ride from house to house on horses. Lots of drinking. It all ends with one of the things that's done at the end of I think there's a central meeting place, and there's like a chicken that's. I think there's a chicken that might be. It used to be beheaded or something. There were it's sort of like in Venice. They used to have like a goose that would be people would climb up a grease pole and try to pull the goose's body and break its neck. It's something like that almost. But the costumes are very rough and homemade, and there's certain Cajun songs that are kind of classics, and then there's lots of food and drink at the end, but it begins as house to house processions, and uh, there's lots of when they arrive at the houses, there's again, like the Krampus, I keep saying this, but there's a kind of swatting of the home of the guests. The young people would be swatted, and there's no association of good or bad or Saint Nicholas, any of that. It's just we're going to swat you. You're going to endure it because it's Carnival. So there's a few. I don't remember the names of the towns, but there's like a handful of towns that are kind of have preserved the tradition, but it's not like it's not really like the Mardi Gras in New Orleans in that sense. There's
Wow.
nothing elaborate. The costumes are the sort of like they look like something that would very homemade that would be in my book in some places. Just kind of ribbons and rags and maybe
Mhm.
some feathers, but cardboard's important.
Cardboard is very important to anyone who's done costume construction
And
knows
any do it
cardboard is
yourself, yeah.
critical. Um, so that gives us a little like an understanding of what Carnival is in Europe and how it comes to the United States. But there's so much more in the book. So again, go to your library or buy the book, or you can come and talk to Al, because as we record this at summer, but one of the things that we have to segue and talk about is Al's first book, and really some of his work on folkloric history on the Krampus. And so tell me a little bit about your work with like Los Angeles Krampus and the Krampusance. Should we call it that? Because it seems like in the past 5 years, there has been a renaissance of the Krampus.
There has, especially this last year, there was a national convention for all the Krampus troops. And it was, if you said this to me 6 years ago, I would have thought, oh, that's going to be, why are you doing that? It's not good. But they had European mask carvers there, and they had talks throughout 3 days, I think. I gave a talk there, and they had lots of vendors, but it's nice to have different cities are kind of coming to the fore. But I am so impressed by how a lot of cities, a lot of folks really are investing in expensive European masks, like hand carved original masks. We kind of, our group in LA, I started it in I guess 2016 or 18. It was around the time I started the book, and then they kind of, my mission was those missions were interwoven. Um, our costumes started out with very much homemade stuff. In fact, some of the folks are still wearing, but it's LA, so you have good artisans that are good at crafting stuff that looks pretty authentic. But yeah, I was very impressed by this. So that was in Bremerton, which is a town outside of Seattle. And yeah, I don't know how many thousands came, but it was pretty big.
Thousands, though.
Yeah, I think so.
Thousands.
I believe it was thousands, maybe not more than two, but it was up there. And yeah, they had closed off streets and people. Yeah, it was a good event. I think it will only get bigger. It could be. I sort of volunteered to host one, but I don't know when or if that's happening. And in Los Angeles, Krampus Los Angeles is the name of our group, and we've been doing events since 2017, 16. Anyway, for quite a while, and we had a little bit of when things went dark for COVID, we had a little bit of a shutdown, but we've been doing them again recently, and we have 3 events this year at least with our Krampus troop, with just about 20, 30 people in nice costumes that show up and harass and beat the guests. And it's kind of like a winter style Oktoberfest because we have a traditional German music, and it's at a brewery, which is German. So,
So, I've now, as most listeners know from my work at Feral House and everything, is that I'm from Milwaukee, and I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, very Germanic city, and so we have a very robust
they have
Krampus
it going. You
culture.
guys have it going on too, yeah.
We
It
do
was a
well,
pleasure
and
visiting.
as a kid, you actually grow up with variations of Krampus. So as a kid, you're familiar with it because we're one of the few cities in North America that celebrate St. Nicholas Day as a thing, and that's a holiday here for children.
That shows you're
And that
really German, not just
yeah,
not just pretenders.
hmm and so
South
that is
German.
very much into the Krampus tradition. And so I'm positioning this, and as other folks who may have come and seen Krampus or a Krampus loft, the Krampus run, the Krampus parade. Um, One of the things that Milwaukee's done with our kind of Krampus celebrations is we've kind of made it like all inclusive, meaning all monsters welcome. And I think that was one of the things so that's my lead up to ask you, Al, as someone who's just really the preeminent expert on the Krampus. So, what are your thoughts on this notion of authenticity and purity in these
Oh,
types
you're
of, whether Carnival to Krampus, or I'm scrapping
uh,
for a fight with
you're
you.
set. Yeah, you're totally trying to set me up. Yes, I'm a curmudgeon. Our okay, so yes, I in LA, the only thing I actually can control, we tell people if they can emulate, pass themselves off as sort of looking like a European Krampus suit, we're good. But yes, that has happened across the board. I won't name names, but I've seen this happen a number of times where people are like, "Well, let's have a Marilud from Wales because they look cool." We have one too, actually.
We
But
have it.
so yeah, so it becomes a kind of a festival of winter spirits is how it's usually often named. which is, we're pretenders here. I'm in Los Angeles. There's no German history. I just I want people to recognize what they went to, and if there's not iconic, European style Krampuses, then there's sort of like, what is it? And then what happens is it tends to turn into a bunch of people wearing holly on their heads, and it's the Ren Fair that's kind of spooky. So
Yeah.
I'm a little
Well,
bit, yes, I'm a stickler. That's my nature. That's why I write history books. It's like I can't help that. I'm going to be like that. I try not to be too unpleasant about it, but I try to exert my control as I can.
and as well you should. And from what our discussion, and this actually makes a little light bulb go off for me, is as I was talking about, is that we grew up in Milwaukee. If you grew up in Milwaukee, you grew up with the tradition, and to some extent, even if you didn't have Germanic heritage in your family, you got your candy on Saint Nick. And so there's always a walking around knowledge of it from
Yeah,
generations. So I think
right.
that because we look at us as being more authentic, is that then we feel that that gives us more license to do what we want with it,
Ah,
because it's ours. Because we have a very sense of ownership about that as a cultural thing. And so
yeah.
I mean, Krampus visits the German grade school here in Milwaukee. So
Oh, that's legit. That's good.
yeah, I
That's
mean,
good. We
so
haven't
you
we
know,
haven't pulled that off. I sort of talked to some German schools, but it didn't come through. Yeah, that's very authentic. So
but
that
so
gives you have a license to do that's you give you an indulgence on doing anything else. Hey, I in one of the mainstays of our festivities was a band called Krampstein. It was a Rammstein cover band. So
I love it.
I'm guilty too. So we had fun with it too. We know we're not the real thing, but I just want to make sure the real thing is out there so people can see that. So I'm sorry,
Yeah,
what were
and
you going to say?
I
What you're saying
appreciate
about
that too.
Milwaukee makes sense.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And again, I think, people, if they haven't, if you haven't seen the Krampus book, do that immediately. It's fantastic. But you were at this convention of the nationwide Krampus convention. What other cities have pretty fun, robust celebrations that you can? So
Ah,
as people think about planning, where are places that they should
well,
go visit?
I mean, Seattle is a big one. I actually long ago, somebody from Seattle Krampus, whenever it popped up, I'm not quite sure, contacted me and I made him. I used to make fur suits, not real fur, but faux fur. I made him a suit, and then he ordered a mask from Europe, and he got a Hurst is the kind of the leader of that. So Seattle's good. They're actually doing on November 18th. They're doing something at Leavenworth, Washington, which is like a alpine. It's all sort of alpine. I guess it's kind of in the mountains, but it's
Okay.
the buildings look very German. So they're doing a Krampus run there. But they were also instrumental in organizing this thing in Bremerton. Seattle and Bremerton are close. So that, and then I talked to people in Florida, in Las Vegas, and all like LA, terrible places to wear a hot Krampus suit. And I also talked to, I guess, there was somebody from New Orleans, and I talked to somebody from Florida who goes to New Orleans. So those are some of the towns that come to mind, but there were a lot more than that. And trying to think.
I know there's a troop in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Yes, there were some Minneapolis folks there. In fact, yes, and because for a long time they've looked really impressive. They got their European masks like quite a while ago, I know. And
Yeah.
yeah, there were Minneapolis folks there. That's definitely should remember them.
Yeah, and so that's so if anybody's interested in looking for a Krampus celebration, you're going to look so time period. I made, did you see I made faces when Al said November? Because so
I didn't
Nikolaus Day.
schedule it. Yeah.
I know
I
you
think they're trying to leave
Nikolaus
the
Day.
other date free. So,
Yeah.
and if anybody's curious about this convention thing I've been talking about, I don't know for a fact it's happening in 2026, but go to just Google Krampus America. That's the name of the convention, and you'll see what photos from last year and what maybe I don't know that I don't know what 2026 plans are, but
Well, and they may have more information about various
yeah,
Krampus groups
yes, they
throughout
would
the
have
country.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's the date. So the dates for this type of event is usually, around late November to like maybe mid-December.
yeah,
Nikolaus Day, St. Nicholas Day is December 6th. And if you're in the Midwest, that means Krampus is coming the night before on December 5th. It's always December 5th. Any
yes.
other day. is not the correct day. And
No.
that's the one authentic thing I will kind of stand by. But again, there's so many great festivals around the country that are really just homegrown. They're grassroots. These are people who really love this tradition and are, as Al was saying, they're they're making these masks, they're building these suits, and it is so much fun. So if you have the opportunity to go to a Krampus celebration, do it really, and or come to Milwaukee, because I think we're doing it better than anybody else at this point. But I'm doing a little home cooking there. Um, so you're already, because we're talking and it is late summer, and I'm sure you're already planning for your Krampus festivities, and you're working on the Bone and Sickle podcast, and you're working on other project. What are you doing, Al, when you're not doing all these other things?
The podcast keeps me pretty busy. It's like a dissertation a month, kind of. Uh, yeah, it's a monthly show, and then we also have a bonus episode. Now, for the monthly show, I actually do deep dive research on a topic. This month is St. George and the Dragon. An recent one was Sin Eaters. Uh, there was The Fates was another episode. So it's kind of mythology, folklore oriented, but also looking at history. And then I have bonus episodes, which I'm just take a 19th century folklore or history text, or even some Gothic fiction, and read that out. But our show is, when we talk about a dissertation, it sounds dry, but the show is done like a radio play. So the original text, I have my co-host Sarah Chavez reads the original text, and then I have sound effects and music I create for all the stories. So, and they're all like that. And so the bonus episode there's no research; they just read the text. But I always loved old radio plays and radio theater, so I kind of tried to recreate that. So it's
They
not
are
talking,
delightful. Yeah,
not a
they are.
talking
I'm
heads.
interrupting to listeners to say, seek it out. If you haven't heard Al's podcast, Bone and Sickle, it's so much fun and informative. I really enjoy it for, when I'm kind of doing that podcast thing, which is like, what's the best way to listen to podcasts when you're doing something else, right?
Yeah,
So it's a great one for long walks and long drives. So definitely listen to the Bone and Sickle.
wear headphones.
Or
The
not.
blaring of the audio. I think people who would be very appreciative of that. Their audio has to be appreciated. Okay, or don't just listen. Okay,
Yeah.
you're free.
And so you have the podcast, and are you working on another book for us?
I believe so. As I started this book was going to so the Krampus book. So we kind of moved towards doing a seasonal a series of seasonal books, and the Krampus book was going to represent winter. So I have spring to do now. Then the Carnival book turned out to be kind of late winter, early spring. So I have been collecting, partly when I thought it was going to include later dates, and it's been collecting spring dates. So now I'm thinking spring and summer, and then this has to be four, right? And then fall will be include Halloween. But spring and summer has lots of interesting celebrations in it too. And fall has the different harvests, obviously Halloween, but also Barleycorn and other festivals. So I want to look at traditional folk festivals, kind of some that are not well known, but because I was focusing on Carnival, all the spring stuff kept coming in, and I'm like, no, it's not Carnival. It's too much, because Carnival deserves its own book. So, and the Krampus isn't all the winter stuff. So, it's like I have to it's all filtering, discarding. But there's so much I want to talk about, and what gets left over tends to be in my show. So.
Yeah. Well, I guess then in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm thinking spring, summer, that's a lot of fertility festivals.
Well, the Green Man, May Day, St. George's Day, yes, a lot of that.
So
Summer
it'll be
kind of
this.
tapers off a little, and then later summer you start to get the harvest
Okay.
festivals, and Halloween will be half the book probably.
So, all right. So spring and summer will be the sexy folklore.
Yeah. Oh, yes, I guess so. There's lots of giant processions, kind of paper mache giants that also
Oh,
need to be discussed, and that's a summer thing. I'm just in my St. George episode I'm working on right now. There's giant dragons that are processed. They moved it to August from St. George's Day, but in Germany there's like the world's largest four-legged robotic creature, which is a dragon that walks through the city. So
Wow.
yeah, I just can't help but stumble onto this stuff, and as I research other things, then it all goes in the folder, Feral House future volumes. I have a spring summer folder already started with lots in it, so that shouldn't be too hard.
Well, I'm excited. I'm excited for the work you're doing, and as a fan, especially, I every time I read the manuscript when it comes through, I'm just delighted because I have, as many of you know, do some work in history, and I love to be surprised, and I love to learn new things. And there's not a time that I haven't read one of Al's books or even listened to the podcast and not learned something I didn't know. And to me, that's fantastic. That to me is the earmark of really great research and a really great researcher, that you're always able to present people with something new and surprising and a new perspective on stuff. So thank you. Thanks for the work. Thank you for doing it.
I'm one of those cheesy popularizers. I'm not an academic. All the reviews that come in, it's all like it's readable, but it is really scholarly and in depth. So I like to try to balance.
And that's kind of where Feral House is. And if you're a reader of our books, you know that's we put academic rigor with accessibility, because and that's what
Entertainment.
Adam believed it. I believe it, is that knowledge is for all of us. It shouldn't be somehow locked away in some, theoretical and proverbial ivory tower. Information is for all of us. So I want to thank you for making time to talk
Thank
to
you.
me, and we can share our conversation with listeners. And as you know, um, all of Al's books are available worldwide, fine bookstores and online retailers, and of course, directly from us at Feral House. So you can just go to feralhouse.com and order those books. Do it today. Okay.
Yeah, do
Thanks.
it. Thank you.
Hey fiends, thanks for listening to the Feral House podcast. We do this about once a month, talking to Feral House and Process Media writers, as well as members of the extended Feral family. You're part of the family. Let us know if you have any questions, or if you have an idea of someone we should talk to. You can send me a note at press@feralhouse.com, PRESS@feralhouse.com.
It's the wondrous world